It's hard to pinpoint what exactly makes a first-person shooter feel so good. The latest example of this, of course, is Doom Eternal, with its strikingly vivid imagery and insanely fast-paced traversing. It was so beautifully grueling on the retinas, it felt like getting the worst eye test imaginable. Top that off with its bombastic weaponry and a soundtrack that's so fat and so whiplash-inducing that it felt like Mick Gordon had gained 90 pounds and decided it would be well funny to just stomp on my neck. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 fans might argue that the feeling of downing 25 mere mortals to earn you a tactical nuke is another example of an unrivaled feeling of satisfaction. There are hundreds of examples I could name that give that feeling of sheer gaming ecstasy, but the F.E.A.R series was a feeling that, although it might not quite match up to Doom, it gave a certain level of gratification that still has me craving a fourth entry into the series. For me, the satisfaction is based on the feedback, and I'm not talking about vibrations or haptic feedback in a DualSense controller, though they do feel pretty good too. I'm talking more about the visual feedback. Seeing an enemy being completely obliterated into an unfathomable amount of bits, or their bodies flailing in slow motion, reacting accordingly to the exact part of the body that I shot with outrageous precision, is one of the most sadistically fulfilling experiences a gamer can have. Let's not forget how old the F.E.A.R series actually is, with the first game being released in 2005 and the most recent release, F.E.A.R 3, being over a decade old now, releasing in 2011. They were rendered on DX9, and at the time this new tech treated gamers to dynamic lighting and shadows, and most importantly the new physics that I've just mentioned, showcasing the ragdoll effects and the ability to blow the enemy's limbs clean off. These have become standardized features in development today, but the developers of the F.E.A.R series, Monolith Productions, maximized their potential, creating one of the most pleasurable first-person shooter experiences there is, and it's still holding up really well today. The first F.E.A.R game was a little rough around the edges visually, as you'd expect, with not many decorative assets throughout the levels and a lot of obvious copy and pasting going on, but yeah, it was 2005, which is why the smaller details like blood mist and watching the dust settle after my bullets have shattered holes in the concrete walls will always be appreciated for a game of its age. Then what became a main staple throughout the whole F.E.A.R series was the intense combat, utilising the slow motion bullet time, giving players that unstoppable godlike intuition. However, going up a flight of stairs though, Jesus. In F.E.A.R 1, the transition between walking so smoothly on a completely flat surface with zero head bopping to then walking up a flight of stairs was anything but godlike. Then what was even more noticeable was the almost unbelievably good AI. It's frighteningly good. I mentioned Call of Duty earlier, but play any of the campaign modes and the AI is laughably predictable, scripted to get behind the same cover every time and pop their heads out like a whack-a-mole machine with only one hole. In F.E.A.R, they switch their movements up every time and they'll move in on your position so aggressively, sometimes throwing grenades and even shouting things like, "He's by the fire extinguisher," then actually shoot the fucking fire extinguisher. They'll even start laying down covering fire to lure me into a false sense of confidence as I'm perfectly lining up a sweet headshot, just for their guy to flank me out of nowhere, leaving me not only intimidated but rather impressed.
Clever girl.
A blend of the supernatural and militaristic themes is something I very rarely enjoy, but the concept and dark nature behind F.E.A.R kept me wanting to learn more and understand the devious actions of the Armacam Tech Corporation. Ran by Harlan Wade, unethical experiments were conducted on his own daughter, Alma, who possesses telekinetic powers, and the experiments were designed to harness these powers into controlling and streamlining a full military force with a single mind. Realizing that Alma can't be controlled though, she's forced into a coma with the intention of using her to breed more psychic prototypes.
Well, that's fucked up in all kinds of ways now, isn't it?
Harlan Wade was obviously nominated for Father of the Year, as you'd expect, and Alma eventually gave birth to two sons, the Point Man and Paxton Fettel, who we play as at various times throughout the series. As the games progressed, the story took a much more meaningful shape, which I don't want to spoil for anyone, but the first game was told mainly through pieces of intel which we could find, and bits of dialogue over the radio. Then came F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin, which was very much the same but with a few in-game engine and interactive cutscenes to witness, and then F.E.A.R 3, publishers Warner Brothers, really upped the cinematic storytelling nature of the series with a much bigger script and plenty more pre-rendered cutscenes. F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin was sort of a prequel/sequel to F.E.A.R 1, so it was an equal, basically, if that's a thing. I've just made it a thing, so it's a thing now. Playing as the standard soldier Michael Beckett, F.E.A.R 2 was my standout game of the series, with the gunplay feeling precise and impactful, while still providing a good backdrop for horror to fall back on, and not only that, there's a man in the game who calls himself Snakefist. So, if that doesn't get you immediately playing this game, then nothing will.
What kind of stupid wiener name is that?
F.E.A.R 2 gave fans of shooters exactly what they want, all the while living up to the promise of terror. This is subjective, of course, but I'll never forget the elementary school level, watching those blue locker doors rattling open and closed while sudden and disturbing flashes of Alma appearing throughout the game. That was terrifying. There's an obvious inspiration towards Japanese horror, which was incredibly popular in the Western market at the time, with the sight of any young girl with long greasy black hair making everyone shit the bed.
My God.
The level of blood and violence still sticks with me even today, and to be honest, they just don't make that many games as brutal as this anymore. I miss them. F.E.A.R 3 was still hugely enjoyable, but there was something a little off when it came to the gunplay, and what's most disappointing about that was the fact that that was the area they were supposed to have worked on the most. The horror was still there, but it was nowhere near as blood-curdling as F.E.A.R 1 and 2, and that's why it's so disappointing that even the gunplay just didn't feel anywhere near as tight and crisp compared to F.E.A.R 2. It was still fun, don't get me wrong, but for the sake of this video I went straight from F.E.A.R 2 into F.E.A.R 3, and there was a noticeable drop in my happiness. What brought that happiness back a little bit though was the introduction of being able to play as two characters, and both simultaneously with a friend in co-op mode too. Pointman being the familiar running and gunning choice, but the new addition to play as his brother Paxton Fettel, who has telekinetic abilities to obliterate soldiers with a simple flick of the wrist, as well as other abilities like totally possessing a soldier for a short period of time before they implode. This meant that Fettel's approach to levels attempting to chain together kills or to tactically keep certain soldiers alive for his own use was a fun addition to the traditional way that F.E.A.R was played. There was much more of an arcadey feel to the game too, with a point score at the end of each level, which was an interesting choice because the points you amassed had an effect on the ending of the game, determined by which character you played with the most. The fact that there was two alternative endings to F.E.A.R 3 though shouldn't really affect the chances of there being a F.E.A.R 4. F.E.A.R 3 sold so poorly though, and the free-to-play F.E.A.R online feature didn't even make it out of open beta, with virtually no interest being shown towards the online side of things. I think short, linear, single-player first-person games are slowly becoming a dying breed, and I was so thankful for Doom Eternal achieving what it did, but even Doom had an online mode, which wasn't received anywhere near as well as the main campaign was, but for a developer to even consider releasing a game without an online mode in today's market, it's just inconceivable. Those who are craving a new F.E.A.R style game, there is a free-to-play demo called Trepang 2 on Steam that a lot of people are calling F.E.A.R 4, and even though the developers don't want their game to be associated with the F.E.A.R series at all, there's a clear inspiration from the series and even a little bit of a sprinkle of Crysis thrown in there too, exhibiting F.E.A.R's gut-wrenchingly satisfying gunplay and the outrageous speed, power, and even the ability to cloak just like in Crysis. It's far from the finished article though, and hopefully they do finish it, but it's been a while since their last update, so we'll have to wait and see. With virtually no sign of a legitimate F.E.A.R 4 being released, one can only hope and conjure up imaginations of what might be. So what would you guys like to see from a fourth F.E.A.R game?
Drugs and violence and unwanted pregnancy.
Do you even want one at all? Would a fourth F.E.A.R game have to incorporate an online mode? Would the safest option be just to package all three F.E.A.R games into a remaster, or even better, a complete remake? That's what I'd go for, to be honest, if we can't have a fourth game. But let us know your thoughts and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.